Hi everyone, it's Kimber, the Study Abroad Specialist. In today's video, I wanted to talk a bit more to my American students specifically about using federal work study while you're studying abroad and some of the reasons why a lot of times you will find that you can't do that. I know that in the past, I've worked with lots of students from the US who have had this question as they start thinking about financial aid, and I've covered financial aid a lot of times for both American students and non-American students on my channel, but I wanted to talk specifically about federal work study. So first of all, what is federal work study? I'm going to put a definition up really quickly so that you can refresh yourself if you don't know. So with a federal work study program, you have to keep in mind that the keyword is right within the definition. So for the federal work study, obviously it is a program that is issued by the federal government. And so overall, you will find that unless you are going to be studying at an American institution that accepts federal work study, that you will not be able to use it abroad. And I know that that can be very disappointing. In another video on my channel, I talked about some of the common jobs that students have while they're studying abroad. And a lot of times for students who are based here in the US, a lot of students depend on the federal work study to be able to find on-campus jobs and different jobs that are related to their school. And in a lot of places that just does not exist, in at least not within that format. So again, there are ways to find jobs while you're abroad, but it's not going to be the federal work study because again, for students who you may be watching this and you're not from the US, federal work study is tied into financial aid. And so a lot of students, they have part of their financial aid tied into being able to get an on-campus job and be able to work a certain amount of hours every week. And that will basically not be included in whatever you're going to be using for your study abroad, even if you're doing an institutionalized or faculty-led program like we've talked about before, and you're able to apply whatever financial aid you have, scholarships, loans, any types of grants that you have. The work study is most likely not going to translate over, with the exception of if you are going to be, let's say, able to work on campus at the foreign-based institution that you're going to, as long as it is a US-based institution. So maybe you are currently studying at Brown University, let's just use that, and you are obviously going to be doing a faculty-led program, so you're going to be doing Brown University in South Africa. And so you do that, but then on campus, there's not really a lot of jobs to do. Part of the reason for that is because the idea of on campus is a lot different in other parts of the world. So basically, you will find that outside of the US, and I mean, we are in a very unique situation. In the US, for most of our colleges and our universities, they are like little cities, even tiny colleges. My undergrad college was very small, and it was like a little city within its own, or even though we didn't have as much on campus as some of the other places I had been for different programs throughout the years, we still were very close to a lot of different things, but it was considered, you know, like I think my campus was like 42 acres, and that was still like an on-campus experience. And of course, we know that schools like UCLA, Berkeley, University of Texas, University of Georgia, some of the other schools, Baylor, all these schools that are just, they have so much in terms of space and buildings that they are cities within cities. In other parts of the world, you're not going to find that. So for example, if you go to a school in the, and this is not all inclusive, so there are some schools in other parts of the world that are similar to what we do, but in a lot of schools in places like the UK or in Germany, colleges and universities at least, in the UK or in Germany or in parts of Canada or in Switzerland, a college campus is just a building. So you have buildings where you go to learn and then you go home. That's it. Like there's not any dorms, there's not any sort of student life activities. You're not going to find obviously things like sororities, fraternities, things like that. And I personally enjoy that. I like the contrast of that. I enjoy that more because again, you just get straight to business and you're there for why you're there. You're not there to sort of socialize, but that's a different conversation. But for the federal work study in particular, part of the reason why that doesn't transfer over is because there aren't really any on-campus jobs to be had, because again, campus is just a building. They may have one person or two people watching the front desk. They have a security guard. They have someone who processes all the paperwork. They have people who sort of do stuff in the offices. but there's not really an on-campus job to work in the cafeteria or work at the front desk of the gym or do whatever. And so that is one of the reasons why it doesn't translate over. The biggest reason why it doesn't is because, again, you have to keep in mind that other governments are not required to recognize, frankly, any of the sort of financial needs of a foreign student. And so what the federal government provides for people here in this country, other governments are not required to recognize that. And same thing for other people coming to our country. So it's not like you're going to be showing up in South Africa and you're going to be like, well, I've federal work study. And so they're like, okay, we have an equivalent for that. They don't. And if they do, it's for their own people. And so you have to just keep in mind that there's not going to be that direct translation. Whereas with things like scholarships or with loans or with grants, those can be directly transferred over, or there's at least an equivalency that you can use because people recognize that, and it's not necessarily federal. There are obviously federal student loans, and with those, typically, unless you are doing faculty led, you're not going to be able to use them. You would have to get private student loans if you want to do a program that is not faculty led and is going to be independent. But for the work study specifically, I know that this is something that students are always looking at. They're like, well, I have this now. What does that mean for me? So what that typically means is what you're going to want to do is you want to sit down with your financial aid advisor. I am not a financial aid advisor. I'm definitely not a financial advisor. I can tell you that. But sit down with your financial aid advisor. You can usually book an appointment with them, and you want to walk through, obviously by now, hopefully they know that you want to study abroad, or maybe you are currently getting prepared to enroll in a program. And so you want to sit down with them and just go through for the upcoming year, assuming that you're not a senior, you want to go through the upcoming year and figure out what financial aid that you have within store to look forward to for the next year. So maybe you have a scholarship that is renewing because you got a great GPA. Maybe you were on a sports scholarship and that needs to be renewed. Maybe you're going to have grants, and then also to looking at your work study. Depending on when you are going to study abroad and how long you are going, they're able usually to put a pause on that. And so what that might mean is it probably is most likely going to mean that you will not have the same job that you had when you were on campus. Let's say you are studying abroad in the spring semester, and during the fall semester, you were maybe working in the dining hall or something like that. You may not have the same job. You might just go back into the general pool, but it does mean that they are able to communicate with the federal government that this person is taking a pause. They are doing study abroad. They will be back at this time, maybe next semester, whatever that looks like. In some cases, you may still be able to have the same job. So maybe you are very close to your supervisor, or you've made a great name for yourself, and they're like, yeah, we want to have you back, and we know that you're coming back after you study abroad. That may happen, but I know that for a lot of students who go to these huge universities, since there's so many students doing federal work study, that if they take time off or they take a pause, they just have to go back into the general population. I hate using that term, but general population pool, and then you will be able to find and pick up your work study once you get back on campus. So I definitely just wanted to explain that and just sort of make the distinction, because I know that as students are going through and thinking about financial aid, and particularly for students who are coming from the US, you know about scholarships, you know about grants, you know about loans, but with the federal work study, if you are a student who's receiving that, there is a high chance you will not be able to use that, with the exception of whether it may be that you are working for on campus with a US based university who may have something for you to do, or there are also instances where you can work for a US based company and they might honor that. But it's a lot harder to find that nowadays, because again, with visa rules and all these different things, a lot of companies don't even want to get into that. But it is worth looking into to see if there are any options. One of the things that you can do as well is, while you're there with your financial aid officer, even with one of your counselors that you might have, for one of your advisors for your college and for your future, you may want to talk to them and see what other students have done. That's always going to be a great indicator when it comes to things like working abroad and finding jobs. What have other students done? Specifically, what have other students who are using federal work study, what have they done to be able to supplement their income, or to be able to potentially find a role and be able to get that work study role going for them while they were abroad? It's not completely impossible, but it's just not going to be something that you're going to find common, which is why I always leave it off the list of eligible financial aid for study abroad, because it's so rare that people get to use it that I just don't like to include it, but it is possible to use. But you definitely are going to have to do a lot more research and a lot more digging to find ways to be able to implement that if you can at all. So I hope this video was helpful for you. I know that if you are not a US student, you're like, okay, I don't even know why I was watching this video, but I'm glad you did, because now you just have some more information for yourself. If you are a US based student and you had questions about federal work study and study abroad, I hope that this has cleared up some information for you. If you have any more questions, definitely leave them below. I love answering questions about anything study abroad, but particularly when it comes to the money piece. I know that a lot of students, this is where they get paralyzed. So it's either you can afford it, and there's always something. So it's like you either can afford it, maybe your parents can afford it, but then you're worried they're going to say no. And so you have to have that conversation. Or there's students who they feel like, okay, like I can afford some of it, my parents are going to pay for some of it, but then I don't know how to handle this budget thing. How is this going to work? You have that group of students. And then you have a group of students who are in a spot in their life where they feel like they cannot afford to study abroad. And I know that in a lot of ways it can be a hardship for people, but a lot of times what that comes from is you don't know how to piece it all together. And so that is what I am here for whatever you need for study abroad. I love helping students. And so definitely leave a question if you have a question about federal work study and study abroad, or anything else study abroad. Always love to hear from you. Please subscribe to the channel. I release videos every single Friday and sometimes on Wednesdays and Thursdays as well. So definitely look out for those. Make sure that you are subscribed and that you click the bell so that you can get all notifications for the videos. And also to share this video. I know that if you are a study abroad student, you probably have some friends or other people in your network that also want to study abroad. And so share this video so that we can get the information out to them. I am so excited that you stayed tuned to watch this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.